And when you get to Paul, Paul gets on his way to Rome, and he has this obsession with getting to Spain. Like, what does he like, the food? You know what I mean? There's something fascinating going on here, because how many times I love Acts 2 because how many times have you heard this preached? Like 100 times, okay? But I can guarantee that you haven't heard it this way. If you go to Acts 2, here we have the tongues passage. Divided tongues as of fire. Okay, this is Pentecost, the coming of the Holy Spirit and all this stuff. The Greek term there is diamorizo. You say, big deal, who cares? Well, if you actually look that term up in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, you would see that that's the same word that shows up in Deuteronomy 32:8. See, that's just a coincidence, Mike. Yeah, well, here's another one from the same passage. At this sound, the multitude came together and they were bewildered. Bewildered is soon oh, guess where we find that? Genesis 11. That's the Tower of Babel story. Okay, are you beginning to see a pattern? What happens in Acts is that you have Jews who are scattered all over the world because of the exile. They're all in the nations. They come back to Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost. They witness the fulfillment of the new covenant, the coming of the Spirit. And it's evidenced by the apostles' ability to speak their languages. They get the story of Jesus, they believe, and what do then? They go back to the nations. And now God has seeded evangelists in all the nations because it's game on. All right, now that we have the resurrection and the ascension of Christ, the new covenant, it being inaugurated in fulfillment, now it's time to go get people out of the nations and bring them back into the family of God. This is all a coherent picture. If you look at a map, here are the place names in Acts chapter 2. You would notice, if you draw a line, let's just go back to the first slide, you'll notice right here, here's Greece and Italy, okay? Just to get you oriented, Black Sea, and of course here's where Israel is. If you compare that geographical distribution, not the names, but the distribution, to the nations of Genesis 10, the nations that were disinherited, they cover the same geographical regions. And in Unseen Realm, what I do is I say, well, let's look at the list back in Acts 2. It begins in the east, and it moves west. When it hits the Mediterranean, it splits north and south. What this is doing, what the list in Acts chapter 2 is doing of the people groups there, is it's saying, look, wherever, it's to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. We're going to start with the Jewish presence in the east. Why are they in the east? Esther, book of Esther, exile, okay, Babylon, Persia, and they start moving west. Every place that is associated with biblical Israel will ultimately hear the gospel first. And as you move in the book of Acts, you're going to see two patterns. You're going to see the Jew first, all the places associated with Israelites, Jews, and then you're going to see a transition to Gentiles. And when you hit the transition to the Gentiles, you're going to realize that, if I put this on a map and compared it to Genesis 10, geographically, the entire list of Genesis 10 is covered by the gospel in the book of Acts, except for one place. We're going to get to that in a moment. But if you look at the flow of the book of Acts, you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, othermost parts of the earth, okay? This is the plan. You go through the book of Acts, and Samaria is mentioned. It wasn't in the Acts 2 list. There was nobody from Samaria at Pentecost. Well, good. We're going to send somebody to Samaria, Philip, to make sure somebody gets the gospel there. And that's the Ethiopian eunuch. He takes it back to Africa. They get the gospel. I mean, all these places. Azotus. Where does the Spirit pluck when he plucks Philip, after the encounter with the Ethiopian eunuch, and he drops Philip in Azotus. Like, what's that? It's Philistine territory. If you look at the coverage of the kingdom under David and Solomon, it's like the only place that their empire didn't cover. But this is an intelligent retelling of the reversal of what happened with the nations. And when you get to Paul, Paul gets on his he's in bonds on his way to Rome, and he has this obsession with getting to Spain. Like, what does he like, the food? You know, I mean, he wants to get to Spain. It's just, to us, it's like a throwaway thing. I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain. Therefore, when I have completed this and I've delivered to them what has been collected, I will leave for Spain by way of you. He's telling the Romans that, look, I'm going to get to Rome because I got to appeal to Caesar and I'm in chains. But you know what? Paul just says, I'm not going to stay there. I'm not going to be like, how does he know? He believes he's not going to end. His life isn't going to end in Rome because I got to get to Spain. So you're a way station, can't wait to see you, but I'm on my way to Spain. What's the big deal with Spain? Take a look at the map. This is Spain to us now. In the ancient world, it was Tarshish. It's the last name of Genesis 10 that has not been covered by the gospel in the book of Acts. Okay, Paul believes his life will not end until he has taken the gospel to every place that was disinherited at Babel. That's why he wants to get to Spain, because if I don't get to Spain, I didn't do the job. I mean, and I know I'm going to get there because God called me to do this. So, see you on my way to Spain.